Welcome to Shardcast, the Brandon Sanderson podcast. We're a bunch of mega fans giving you news discussion and, of course, a whole lot of opinions about Brandon's works and the Cosmere. I'm Eric, and joining me is Ian.
Hey, I'm WeiryWriter, and it feels like it's been forever since I've been on.
It has been a long time. We've not been recording as often as we would, so we don't have much of a queue, but we got 2 weeks to produce these. That's fine. Mm-hmm. Also joining us is Evgeni.
Hi.
You're not in the spiritual realm anymore.
I am not in the spiritual realm. I have descended down into the basement that is the physical realm.
So what happened to that doorknob?
Nothing. Never had one.
Okay, but why not?
Just got a door and no doorknob.
Why?
Don't need it.
It's open source, man.
It's open source. Also joining us for the great sass, the jokes that probably make me laugh the most on Shardcast, is David.
Hi, I'm Windrunner on the forums. Just hanging out. Glad to be back.
Yeah, we're bringing it back. This time, we're going to be talking about Awakening and BioChroma.
Wait, but who are you?
And I'm Chaos.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. So we're going to talk about Awakening this week. And there's a lot of things that we can talk about that magic system, as we discovered. I was like, is there a lot to talk about? Then we did research. It's like, we got plenty to do. But first, let's talk about some news, because we haven't talked about news on this show in a long time, actually. Going through, long ago, at least sometime in 2020, Brandon talked about that Jorgen and Spensa would get alternating viewpoints in Skyward 3, which I'm very excited about.
What's the tentative title for that?
We don't. The
Nowhere.
tentative one was Nowhere, but
Yeah.
originally his publisher didn't like it, so I doubt it will still be called that. We're going to Nowhere.
It's going to be a compound word.
Yeah.
And it has to start with an S.
Star never stars.
Word.
Never star.
Word.
Never Star Word.
Nailed it.
Star Wars.
There
That's probably
was
available.
There was a reading from part of a Lift interlude from Rhythm of War.
Yep.
We never had a chance to talk about that. Which we'll link all these things below in the description. Then Brandon confirmed that the novella before Rhythm of War would be a Risen novella, and
with the Rock One being pushed back to the gap between books 4 and 5.
Right. Yep.
Okay.
In theory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I remember in that Stormlight update, he's like, "Oh yeah, I have a week to write the Risen novella." Okay, Brandon. Sure.
Well, I think he managed to start that, and
sometimes this camera's just like, "Yo, I don't want to be in focus." And I don't know why.
I'm not used to being in the physical realm, and so I
of course
dissipated a little bit.
In the spiritual realm, all cameras are focused to their spiritual ideal.
No, I don't have to worry about like being in focus there. Yeah.
I've missed this so much.
We haven't even gotten into the content.
No. The content is the worst bit of this episode. What was I talking about?
Doesn't matter. Let's. Brandon also talked about how even though there's Eshonai Venli flashbacks, Venli's not really the main character of the book, and so there's a different main character of the book.
Yeah.
And we also got the UK Rhythm of War cover,
which has Shalon on the cover, according to Ben.
No.
I was like, wait, when did Ben McSweeney speak?
No, he's referring to Jeebus.
I'm just scrolling Jeebus right now.
Well, it's like the others. Let's show it off here. So it's definitely Like the other UK covers.
Our resident UK expert,
In that
Overlord
he lives
Jeebus.
in the UK. And he's from the UK.
makes him an expert, says that UK covers in general are more symbolic than they are actually like factually representational of the book.
I
And
mean,
so,
I looked at the Oathbringer cover and I couldn't tell what the Oathbringer cover was trying to depict. So,
yeah.
So,
It was
So-
Jasna with a sword.
Was it though?
Thief in there. Well, in theory, it was.
In theory, great. Well, anyway, with that in mind, I don't think it's very fruitful for us to go into it. Some people really like the UK covers. I'm not the biggest fan, but it's probably just a stylistic preference in that we're Americans and it's a different market. So,
to be fair, I also don't like a lot of the US one. Like,
yeah, I don't
Michael
like
Whelan is a fantastic painter. His paintings don't work for me as covers. So
I like the pretty storms. They're really
The
cool
storms
looking.
are high quality.
yeah.
High storm
glad-
quality, you could say.
Hey.
I'm glad
You're
Michael
welcome.
Whelan is the cover artist because Brandon loves Michael Whelan.
Yes.
Eh.
Yeah.
I wish there'd
Not
been more
for
than a brick wall on Oathbringer.
I'm with you there. Lastly, we have details on the Way of Kings Kickstarter, which will likely be July, but might be delayed depending on how the economy goes. So lots of people are like, hey, this isn't the time to release something for $200+ for various tiers. Maybe we shouldn't do this year. So it could be delayed. They weren't totally sure.
Yeah.
But basically, Way of Kings Prime is going to be coming out. It'll be posted on his website. And you'll get an ebook for every tier, even if you don't buy the expensive $200 edition.
Yeah, so let me do a very quick recap on the tiers. Way
Great.
of Kings Prime available as an ebook on the website to everyone, not just Kickstarter supporters. That might even go out before the Kickstarter. Tier 1, digital goodies, wallpapers, ebook of the novella, the Wonder Sale, what's probably going to be.
If it happens.
If it happens, yes. Tier 2 is going to be the physical version of that, so physical goodies and a physical copy of the novella. Tier 3 is going to be the actual leather bound, which obviously is a physical thing, plus all the goodies, physical and digital.
Like $200 plus for that tier.
Yep. No physical copy of the novella in Tier 3 currently. So if you want that, you're going to need to add it as an add-on. And then Tier 4 is going to be kind of the collector's, I want everything possibly in the known universe, plus maybe more. We'll see.
And you get to pick before the Tier 4, you get to pick a Radiant Order and get some goodies there, right?
Right. So I think my understanding is everyone in the Kickstarter picks an order. And so we'll get an official Radiant sorting hat survey
Excellent.
quiz thing online before this. So if you don't know which order you are or which one fits you the best, you can take that and you can get sorted into one of them. And then when the
We should do
Kickstarter
an episode on that and do that for all of us.
We should do it
Absolutely.
live.
Ooh,
Yeah.
yeah.
we can do that.
Yeah.
But you can take the quiz, you can figure out which order you are, and then when the Kickstarter launches,
Launches?
Lounges.
I was
It's
following.
a nice
though.
mouthfeel.
That was good. It was good. Launches? Dukas?
you get to pick an order. And all of your, well, not all, but like a lot of the perks, a lot of the stretch goals will be themed around the order you pick. And so Tier 4 is just going to have all of them.
You can add on additional orders.
And yeah, a bunch of different add-ons, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But we have a link in the...
Yep. On our wonderful news post.
I'm just hoping that the physical edition of the novella matches the physical edition of Edge Dancer I have.
Yeah, that is going to be interesting.
Not standard.
It's
Yeah.
never going to happen. I'm sorry.
No,
Since
because
the
that one
Tor
was published
edition-
by Tor. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be.
Well, it's like they could, it just wouldn't have the Tor emblem on it, but they could match the physical dimensions and theming of the book.
Yeah, that's
They weren't really sure how that physical edition would go, just that there would be one, and they're in talks, I think.
Yeah.
So not quite
It's
sure.
it's hard to plan that when it doesn't exist yet.
So there's an idea. Look, Brandon's told ideas. That's fine. Cool. Well, that's cool. And then one last piece of news. Long ago, we had on a hemalurgy episode, I think last year, Jess was just talking to me about how she just hates how Yasna soulcasted Shallan's blood in Way of Kings. And so Jess did a wonderful biological look at all the different things of blood and how one universal donor doesn't really work. So you can go check that out below. It's neat.
blood for the blood god.
Let's talk about Awakening. So what do you need for Awakening? That's the magic system from Warbreaker.
BioChromatic breath.
Yeah, but you need more than just breath. What else do you need?
To
Color.
be awake.
Okay, yes. Thank you for that cutting analysis. You need
Command.
color. You need a command, and you need color. So you say a command, and you have to say it in your native language. So I feel like that's some identity stuff going on there. Or like connection stuff.
It is indeed if we check the WOBs that will come later.
Oh, okay, great, cool. Yeah, that's what I figured. But then the weird part is that it drains color. And
Yeah.
Yes.
because color, as we've learned from Roshar and Gems, color is important because reasons.
Yeah. So obviously we're going to talk about color a lot in this episode. The place where it is weird on Roshar is with how... So obviously some gems in Roshar are different functionally when it comes to magic. Using a ruby will not accomplish the same thing as using a sapphire in many cases. The pickle is rubies and sapphires are the same crystal.
Yep, they're both
Yeah,
They
corned
just
on.
have, they just have different imperfections, and that leads to like different colors.
Yep.
And so it's obviously not the actual gem that is important. It is the perception of the people that build, like the perception that's built around those gems that people like.
I don't know. Perception might play into it, but I don't think it's solely perception.
Right.
There was a wob that was like indicating that perception was a part of it, I think.
Yeah.
I think
I
we read
imagine
it.
it would be.
It's like part of like mortal perception that these things are different things.
Yeah.
But it's Cosmere is complicated.
Yeah, and the weird thing with Awakening is that we have a word of Brandon that said the color draining is actually like changing the object's spiritual aspect so that it doesn't have that color, and then you can't drain it again from it. Which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, so my understanding there is that it's not like pigments being destroyed or whatever. It's the effect of Awakening is not so much draining of color as it is spiritual change that manifests in the physical realm as a color change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That seems useful.
I would say that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which is interesting in the context of like Nightblood and Vivenna's blade from spoilers for everything, by the way.
It's Warbreaker. We talk about some things.
Yeah, or just shard blades in general, honestly, because they grade the limbs as well.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Or lifeless.
Yeah, so there are like the spiritual effects that do affect those. Yeah, because Vivenna's blade does act a little different from regular shard blades and how it slices things.
It turns people gray.
Yeah.
I don't think it burns their eyes, actually.
No, I don't think it burns their eyes.
Mm-mm.
So it's almost like it is draining their color in the same way that like creating a lifeless
Yeah.
drains the body's color. It feels similar in that way.
Yeah, it does kind of seem similar. Yeah. Because lifeless are gray. Normal awakeners drain things to gray, but Susapran drains them to white.
Yeah, I think that's an efficiency thing.
I think that's an efficiency thing as well, which is interesting when you think about it in the context of blades. I think.
Yeah,
We'll
I guess
probably revisit all of that later as we talk about the actual mechanics of this, because this was supposed to be the quick overview section.
Quick overview. It's like, well, what if we talk about the spiritual mumbo jumbo?
This is Shardcast.
That was a close one.
Look, but the thing is that with Awakening being one of our oldest magic systems, we haven't really talked about how it works in the context of our newer framework of all these spiritual properties and stuff, because we know a lot more than we did in 2009. So much more.
Just a little bit.
Right? So it is interesting to think about that. Although, fun fact, the word invested comes from Warbreaker.
It's true.
Because you invest like a cloth with breath. And so that's the first noted thing of investiture. Really.
And that kind of ties into the fact that Vasher is one of the earliest, really Cosmere aware characters we get, other than Hoyd.
Yep.
Who doesn't really count because he never talks about anything.
Well, he does talk about it, just very cryptically.
Yeah.
Not very helpfully for scholars.
But we were talking about the basics of Awakening, and so we covered color, which is needed as fuel for whatever it is that you're doing. We covered command, which is the action that you want the awakened thing to perform.
It's the capital I intention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Really, it has to be, right?
Yeah, because a huge part of the command is also almost the bigger part of the command is not the verbal part, but the mental thought of what is happening, the visualization.
Yep. Yeah, the word is just helps that visualization, I think.
Yeah, it's the thing that focuses the magic into a specific effect.
Yep.
The focus, huh?
Yes, that's what Brandon told me, that commands were the focus, but then later he's like, well, focuses are really more of a human construct of well, no, that focus isn't necessarily a real term.
Yeah, no, I mean crutch for us and people talking about things, not so command, color, and
breath.
The investiture source. Yeah.
Yep. I guess I see why you were looking in different directions, Ian, when I said fuel for the color.
Yeah, that's the weird thing, right? Because the breath is also the investiture, right?
Yes. And I think I want to say there's a word of Brandon about saying that the color drain isn't actually fueling.
No, it's not.
So, yeah.
It's just an effect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little different.
One of them's the gas, one of them's the oil.
Yeah, it's a necessary component, but it's not the fuel.
More of a catalyst almost?
Maybe.
Yeah, it's tough to give it to name its role because we don't really understand why or how, so it's tough to be how does it fit in?
Well, it's spiritual mumbo jumbo. It might not necessarily match up cleanly to something we have on Earth.
It's because Warbreaker wanted to be a colorful world, and so Brandon made color matter. But in the actual magic system, I don't know why. It has
it's because Mistborn is so dull and dreary, and Elantris was so dull and dreary.
Pretty much though. Pretty much.
That's the real reason.
Asked Brandon for a world with more color.
Yeah. Oh, that's why I typically when people ask for Cosmere works, it's if you're not into fantasy, start with Warbreaker. Great choice. It's colorful. It's fun.
It is. The beginning is a little dull, I think, ironically, but also
that's because you're an Idris.
It's an Idris, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
Also, I have a colleague, and her name is Idris, and that throws me off.
Huh. Yeah, and then we also have Idris Elba, who is from the country, as we all know.
Yeah.
He keeps that quiet.
Maybe he can tell us about the many war in the royal house. Okay, so breath is quite interesting because breath is one of our first examples that Brandon said of innate investiture.
Yeah.
And innate investiture doesn't necessarily have a great definition currently, but we know breath is innate investiture and not kinetic. It's a subject of a bit of debate whether if you store things in a metal mind, if that's innate investiture or kinetic. So let's just gloss over that for a second.
Well, I also don't necessarily think the distinction is kinetic versus
Binary?
innate.
Yeah. Well, there's actually just conflicting wobs about that, where Brandon does say that metal mines are innate investiture. I'm like, no, why? Yeah, I would think that those are different.
In my head, innate investiture is innate to like investiture that people or creatures or things come into existence with.
Yeah, I agree.
Almost like, well, I was going to say like natural investiture, but that has other implications because natural makes me think of like high storms.
Right. Yeah. But
like people,
but part of preservation that's in them that makes them sentient, right? Like that would be innate investiture. It's just
yes.
Unless you get to give it away.
Yeah. Theoretically, there should be a static investiture counterpart to kinetic.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's how I think of like storing storing investiture in the metal mind. I think of that as static investiture.
Yeah, he's just never used that word, so
Yeah.
Until it's in the books, it's not like canonical, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So breath, I've always pictured as kind of like, those lizards that can detach their tails.
Sure.
It's that, but with your soul.
And you can't grow a new tail.
And you can't grow a new tail.
And the shards of dragon, right, Ian?
I mean, yes.
That's why.
I don't think that was part of endowment inspiration.
It could have been. You don't know.
The distinction I want to make here is that breath is not all of the Nalthian's innate investiture.
No, it can't be.
So giving away your breath means you still have some innate investiture, because I think if you were completely devoid of innate investiture, you'd be dead or nearly so.
Or you'd wish you were.
Yeah.
Sure.
Or like non-existent, like I don't even know what that would mean.
So I guess breath is similar to what Ian was comparing it to. It's a piece of the people's soul that they can trade and give away. And
so it's like when those tails get detached, there is still a nubbin. Like it's not just so there's like a teeny tiny bit. So it still works.
It's the perfect analogy.
It is.
It's brilliant. I like the part where you're super pixelated too for all this. That's great. But your audio's fine, and that's all I care about. So we changed the region. It's just how Discord's going to be today. Everyone's using the internet now.
Yeah, there's a few people on the internet lately.
Yeah.
Our internet got quarantined, so it has to stay home. It can't travel over the wires.
Yeah, you were quarantined in the basement, right?
It is true.
Yeah. So, when you give away you start with a breath. When you give away your breath with a command, you become a drab, which doesn't mean you're dead, but you are more susceptible to sickness.
It seems like your life is just generally kind of like Brent says in the annotations that you're more prone to depression. Like people just like you kind of lose a little bit of like semi-magical life sense that people have. Like you don't notice when people look at
you lose that. Yep, because they have life sense and
you become less vibrant.
Yeah.
Which I feel like we don't talk about. Like there's like a little ethical component of, okay, all the people had to lose their breath too.
Oh yeah, well I mean I think that's part why Vasher went to Roshar for an easier fuel to keep himself alive, right?
Mm-hmm. That isn't morally icky.
Yeah.
So the whole thing with kind of losing a little bit of your life and like becoming less vibrant and especially more susceptible to disease makes me think of that. I feel like it's a wob where we know that people on Roshar are generally healthier because of like the extra investiture
Yeah.
that is around. And so strong parallel between more investiture means more life, more health, more good stuff. Where on kind of the extreme end, you end up with like high-powered awakeners and returned being just completely immune to disease.
Yeah.
And then on the low end, on the low end, you have drabs who are. I don't even know if that's the low end. Maybe there's a way to like further drain the innate investiture from
hemalurgy, man. Easy.
Well, even outside,
But this does remind me that like health is a ferrochemical attribute. Like it can be converted into investiture.
Right.
Yeah.
More or less.
Yeah, but the breath is, Brandon has said, like a magical booster, so the body doesn't need to use its immune system as much.
Yeah. Oh, and it is worth noting that like all breaths are not created equal. So
That is
people who
true.
are younger or healthier will display like a slightly stronger breath to them, and those that are like elderly or more sickly will have a noticeably weaker breath.
The
And
Ars
so-
Arcanum does talk about strength of breath, and we don't really know the
There's
details.
a slight
of that.
variance.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because we usually think of it as a discrete unit, but it's not. There is variance.
Yeah. It's like in terms of like measurability, like it's a good shorthand, but it's not quite 100% accurate.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's probably why the heightenings are approximate, because the breaths would have different strengths and stuff. So maybe we should just talk about the heightenings real quick, because we're talking about breaths and stuff.
Mhm.
And then we'll
Makes
talk
sense.
about awakening details. So let's just show this chart on Wob mode. That sounds sensible. So
Heightenings, if you don't remember and you haven't read Warbreaker in a while, are like discrete levels where the number of breaths you possess gives you special abilities, so to speak.
Are they technically discrete?
No.
Because it's like,
Discrete-ish.
yeah, it's like it's a sliding scale where it's like, because there's a variety of abilities that are given, like perfect pitch, perfect color, and so there are points where it's like at this point, like that ability is maxed out.
Yep.
And that's kind of where the dividing points are, but it's
they use that example with
Lucy.
color recognition. The more breaths you have, you'll get better at it, and then
Yeah.
at the third heightening, then you have that. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
I think Vasher's pretty explicit that like every single breath adds something. Like
Yes.
it will, like every little something gets improved every time you get a new breath.
It, in a way, brings you closer to endowment, closer to divinity.
and just more shard power, you know?
Yep.
So first heightening, we got RR recognition.
Was that the
that's
one?
like detecting like the aura
Of
color
awakeners.
change from holding breath.
Yeah.
Mhm. So you can like estimate how many someone else has is basically what it is good
Right,
for.
because the more breath you have, that changes the colors around you. And
Mhm.
that's
Yep.
how the Court
You
of Gods
can-
is like, hey, you're an awakener, you can come in or not, you know?
Which is really cool. God, Warbreaker is so cool.
It's really cool. I like
Yes.
talking about this is like, wow, what a cool world. It's good. Then second heightening, we got perfect pitch, which a side note, we know Hoyd at least has, right?
Mhm.
Because he does talk about that. Third heightening, we got perfect color recognition. Fourth heightening, perfect life sense. So I guess that's the sense of just other breath around, period.
Other
Other investiture.
investiture.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
I guess.
Vasher appears to be able to detect Syl.
Oh, that's a
when
good point.
Paladin goes to talk to
Yeah.
him.
So that
It's
must,
like
that totally
It's
must
like a
generalize.
bronze type thing where you can just sense stuff.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's actually
But it's
a
probably
really
less powerful than bronze. It's probably more like localized.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't really flare breath. You know, like it's
No.
kind of like just like an active effect.
Are you saying the breath could
Yeah.
flicker?
Technically.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Then fifth heightening, we get agelessness. So they're immune to disease and aging.
And this is also the heightening that all returned automatically return at.
Yeah, they get a divine breath, and that's a single breath that just launches them into the fifth heightening.
Mhm.
Then sixth heightening, instinctive awakening.
which I believe just makes it much easier, like lower barrier to like the mental intention command thing.
Yeah.
It's easier to find new commands.
It's easier
Like
to use basic commands and find more advanced commands.
Because it is instinctual.
Right.
You know what command to use because you will use the commands.
No, I think it's more just that you're the more investiture you have, the closer to endowment you are. But you know,
You never know.
then we have 7th heightening, vested breath recognition. Oh, in noticing the aura of objects. And can tell if something is invested with breath, which is really interesting, actually.
It's kind of like the first, but for objects.
But for objects and not people, which is very interesting that is different.
Yeah. I wonder if you can see metal
super
mines.
high.
Yeah.
I bet you can, yeah.
Yeah, that's like 5,000 breaths, approximately. So that's 7th heightening. So that's a lot.
Yeah.
Then we get to the OP stuff. Yes.
Yeah. Like, I almost wonder if that's like, you're less noticing like a physical like color aura and more you're like tapping into like either the cognitive or spiritual realm at that point.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah.
Because like if there was a color change, you would be noticing that much earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Ars Arcanum does say reaching above the 6th heightening is very rare, so the details are very unclear.
Yeah. We need a Suzabron POV in book 2.
Ooh, that'd be sweet, though.
Please.
Then 8th heightening, command breaking. So that's OP. You can instinctively override commands and other objects, including lifeless. Great.
Yeah. Which like you can do that at lower levels. It's just you're at that level, you can just brute force your way through it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Then 9th heightening is Greater Awakening, where you get to awaken stone and steel. And so
this is not like, it will not inherently create like a Nightblood-esque object. Like this is just a classical awakening type thing. You can put breath into steel and metal before that, but you can't awaken it to do anything up until that point.
Yeah.
We'll talk about these later when we discuss the laws of awakening. But essentially, the further away something is from being alive or having been alive, the more difficult it is to awaken. And things like stone and metal are very, very disconnected from being like. It's much easier to awaken, say, something made of wood than it is stone and metal.
Which makes sense because breath's life, you know.
Yeah.
So I believe there is a wob about like if like you were to soul cast a person into stone, that stone would be easier to awaken.
Yes.
Yep. Yes. Which makes a lot of sense both on instinctive level and also on like realmatic level, because in the spiritual realm, you're not changing the entire history of this object or this person or this stone. It's now it is stone, but like the rest of the spirit web has been
it was
and
a
continues
person.
to be
Yep. Oh, and then 9th heightening, you can just command things that you're not physically touching. Oh, that's a good point. You have to be physically touching to command, unless you're at the 9th heightening. But you can just command things with the sound of your voice. You don't need to touch it.
which allows for that extremely epic climax of Warbreaker where Suzabron walks down the hallway and just
Awakens
object
everything.
around him awaken and like roll in like an army around him.
God, these high-level heightenings are so overpowered. It's great. They're really good. Which I guess this means Shashara needs to be 9th heightening to awaken Nightblood, even though there was more going on there. So, then 10th heightening has all the OP stuff. Color distortion, perfect invocation drains things to white rather than gray. And you can do mental commands and not speak them aloud. Which is how the God Kings could pass their breaths after their tongues were removed, but it apparently takes a lot of practice.
It's interesting that the vocal component of Awakening is so powerful.
Yeah.
You have to speak the command. You have to speak the command in your native tongue.
Yeah, because it was like the tones and the what did they call it?
Iridescent tones.
Well, no, but
the tones and the hues.
The tones and the hues. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The commands in Awakening have always made me think of the oaths that Radiants have to speak. And obviously it's not a command when the Radiant speaks an oath, but like advancing a level is...
You have to say it.
It appears to require vocalization. Like Syl... No?
Lift does not speak her ideal when she fights Nail. He says she thinks an ideal, and she says, "I said it in my heart," and she gets her blade.
Oh, that's true. That's a good point.
Yeah.
I also think Lift is cheating.
Lift does get to cheat. That is certainly true.
But like as we see here, you technically don't need to speak aloud for Awakening either. It's just very difficult. So like Lift might be like, it's not technically required absolutely for you to speak it, but there's other like required things going on that like speaking it is just easier,
especially because Syl is like, you need to say the words, right? Not just think the words, you need to say the words, but like
Lift is partially in the cognitive realm, so maybe she can cognitively you know what I mean, like she does have there's an argument to be made.
And also the difficulty parallel doesn't necessarily translate between the two systems. Like the fact that in Awakening, mental commands are more difficult than verbal ones doesn't necessarily mean that the same applies to oaths and surge binding. Like maybe they're just different in surge binding. Or maybe the difficulty gap is not as large.
I do have a parallel. How many of you have read The Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini?
I did a long time ago. I never read the fourth one, though.
Yeah.
The fourth one is like...
I read the third one right before Mistborn 3 came out, and I was like, wow, Mistborn 3 is so much better. Wow, holy crap.
Well, you only have to have read the second one for what I read. But like, there is like, in that series, like, magic requires like to speak the ancient language, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
But in the second book, like, Aragon like learns about like mental magic that like doesn't require speaking.
Yeah.
And it's said like it's so much more difficult and more dangerous because like a slight mental distraction can drastically change the effect that is produced.
Mm-hmm.
So what if with breath, it's not that a slight mental distraction doesn't change what you do, it just makes it fail. It's like an Aeon without the chasm line. It's just like it's not quite right, so it just fails.
I mean, your command is wrong, right? Or not command, but like your mental command is wrong, and that just doesn't produce an effect.
And that's why like at lower levels, like speaking is required because that kind of like forces your brain into the right thought shape.
Yeah, totally. And like that makes sense that mental commands would be very hard because, especially if you weren't a trained awakener, like training the God Kings to actually transfer that would probably be a pain.
Especially when they've never spoken. You know, like you got to get any of that across. Like that's got to be a little tricky.
Yeah. Especially because the sound does seem to be important. With like that tones and hues.
So,
some deep stuff there.
Because there is such a big deal about being at higher levels, being able to awaken within the sound of your voice. Does mental awakening require you to touch the object?
I feel like no, purely because he was, you know what I mean? Like that doesn't feel like there'd be that restriction, you know, like, oh, you still have to touch it if you're doing the mental command. Like, it seems like non-touching just opens that up, you know?
It could be a difficulty thing that it just like uses less breath if you like touch it or something.
Yeah. Because like theoretically it's like your sound is touching that object. So it's like you don't have to touch that object. But like with the mental command, the sound waves are not traveling.
In the spiritual realm.
I mean...
Let's maybe talk about the laws So
Sure.
we have the law of biochromatic parallelism. So the closer a host is to living shape and form, easier it is to awaken. So that's because biochroma is power of life, so it seeks patterns of life.
Yep. So awakening a straw man
Mhm.
much easier than awakening a stick.
Mm-hmm. Is this also like the human shape thing? Like you can like cut a cloak into a human form?
Yep.
Like,
Yes.
Which is interesting.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this actually reminds me of forging from the Emperor's Soul,
Yeah.
where something that is more plausible is easier to forge.
Yeah, I
So
can
if-
see that.
Like things that are closer to what you want to do are easier in the
Yep.
Cosmere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the cool thing about this is like really like the whole efficiency thing, where
Mhm.
it's something that Brandon says he wants to play around in Nightblood with a Nightblood, but more or less, if you can use a bunch of tricks to make awakening much more efficient by like adding some of your own blood to a figure or hair and things like that, that will bring it closer and closer to that ideal.
That use less breath.
Which is such an interesting way to bring voodoo into the whole thing, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's got
Because
something
That
cool
was
where
one of his inspirations, I think.
Yeah, because you're creating
I can't say I know what you're talking about.
simulacra.
Mhm.
Okay.
Simulacra is what you're creating.
Yeah. Yeah. There's cool like parallels with blood sealing too. Like there's a lot of that same
true.
like using pieces of people, at least in the lore of it.
Mhm.
But
Yeah. And then speaking of efficiency, the law of comparability, the amount of breath required to awaken something isn't indicative of its power once awakened. So a
Mhm.
piece of cloth that's cut into a square and a cloth that's cut into the shape of a person will take different amounts of breath, but do basically the same thing. Which is really interesting, because I'm kind of reminded of creating Lifeless. Like Lifeless used to take like 100 breath, but then Yeasteel came up with the, I think it's probably Yeasteel, I don't know if that's 100%, came up with the single breath command. And they do
Yeah.
basically the same thing, although there are some functional differences with Lifeless in particular, but
Mhm.
Lifeless are kind of
Yeah.
weird. But
Mhm.
essentially, your command is being executed in a similar way, but it's more efficient if it's shaped as a human-shaped thing, and you say the right commands and things.
And obviously the ultimate human shape is a human
human.
body.
Mhm.
Probably an efficiency thing. Because why do I have the impression that if you don't visualize it quite right, it would take more breaths? No, that's not true. That's not true at all.
It
It's
just
probably wouldn't work.
fizzles.
It just wouldn't do the thing you wanted it to do.
Yeah.
Well, no, it
Yeah.
doesn't do anything. Like
Mhm.
Vivenna was trying to awaken a rope at one point, and like her breath was just not going in there.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And there's also like, I think there's a wob that I threw in, but it is more or less like your awakening has to do with what species you are. So in theory, like a singer would have things that are more singer-like. There's like a whole canid thing in there where if you were like a canine species, would it be more canine?
You'd have to have it shaped as a canine. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, so
You would want
it's
to cut
not
a cloak
just-
into a human shape. You would want to
Yeah.
cut it into something resembling you.
Yeah, it's the closer it is to the person doing the awakening.
Ooh, that
Mhm.
is interesting.
Because I think with Vasher's cloak has like tears like where he has scars.
hmm
I think.
I think that is true. I think that actually is true. I don't remember 100%, but
I don't remember that at all.
I don't remember it either. I did read this last year, but it's been
But
a
I can totally buy that it's a connection thing, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, you need like a connection. Yeah, that when the object looks more like you, that you have more of a connection with it, and that makes it easier to have the breath flow to it or something.
Yeah.
I know. I always have kind of wondered if what you're kind of doing is almost copying like a little portion of your cognitive aspect in the breath, and that is kind of serving as the brain of what's happening, like in the same way that like a spren has like the whole cognitive component of Fabriel.
Well, I always thought of it almost like a mini shard intent, right? Like that's kind of what Nightblood is.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, that's what I always thought it was like. Like, shards kind of have their own command in a very loose sense, right?
Yeah.
And so I always felt that like Nightblood's destroy evil command was kind of like that.
Mhm.
In some sense.
Yes.
It's a lower level, but Nightblood's
Yeah.
special compared with other awakened objects. But
Yeah.
I am on board with this, but I think the way I've been thinking about it is as a cognitive framework, which oddly makes me think of like Dalinar's visions, which are
right.
a similar thing. But
Yeah.
when you awaken thing, the mental command, the thing that you are imagining your awakening subject is going to do is kind of like you're forming this cognitive framework, and then you are imposing that framework onto the subject, and then that becomes the subject's entire soul, really.
Yeah, it's like it's new cognitive aspect because it wasn't thinking as much before. Yeah.
Which is why you can have commands like I don't remember the exact command,
Fetch.
but like, well, not even fetch keys, like be as my fingers
Mhm.
And grip that I must.
that which I must.
Yeah.
Which is like a completely nonsensical thing, unless the thing you are awakening essentially has your thoughts or knows your thoughts.
Yeah, it is kind of like that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, you're
Mhm.
granting that.
I guess my issue with that is that like it's just like such a monumental like difference of scale that like a shard's intent is a fundamental part of that.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
This like the command is interchangeable. Like you can reuse that investiture ad infinitum.
Yeah. No,
It's not fundamentally a part of that thing in the
But you
same
can-
way that a shard's intent is.
I totally agree with that. It is definitely a much lower scale thing.
Mhm.
Totally.
But you can make it that way, though. Which is what they did with Nightblood. You can give a command to something so strongly that it will not be able to change without destroying it, which I consider to be much
that's
closer
true.
to a shard level command than
Yeah.
just some sort of ephemeral awakening.
Yeah, I would
Mhm.
agree with that. I can see why you're hemming and hawing, though. I understand that.
Yeah.
And I realize that's using the lowercase I intent in a much broader sense. I understand that.
Mhm.
It is like that.
Going back to the law of comparability on why, just because it takes more breath to awaken something doesn't necessarily make it more powerful. Vasher has, during his talk with Vivenna, like compares it. Like most people think about like, oh, you're just pouring like investiture into a cup, but that's wrong. You're breaking down a door.
Yeah.
Once the door is open, how much effort you want, whether it's break it down with a sledgehammer or you have a key. Once the door is open, the door is open.
Yeah.
So it's like once you have that connection forged to endowment to power this thing, awakened object, to run around and do stuff,
It just works.
it just works.
Oh, sorry. Yeasteel developed Ichor alcohol. He was
He
a
did.
lifeless expert, but it seemed like Shashara made the command that could create a lifeless with a single breath. Just wanted
Gosh,
to correct
those are the
that.
cool things.
Mhm. Credit
knows
to
what
the
that-
woman.
Who knows what Denth did? We don't know what he
Don't
did.
want to like pull a.
He was a swordsman.
Oh boy. No, Arsteel was that.
He was really the Chad of the five scholars.
So, why don't we talk about Vasher's biochromatic entities?
So the first one is spontaneous sapience in a corpse, or I don't
Deceased
remember what the
host.
last part of that. I remember
Deceased
spontaneous
host.
in a deceased host, which are the returned, which is
Yep.
a dead body that is a person and not just a walking corpse.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, Vasher
Okay.
always uses sentient when he should really be saying sapient, but whatever.
Early Brandon.
Yeah.
They're difficult words to get right. Anyway,
Yeah.
So those are type 1s. Type 2s are mindless manifestations in a deceased host. So still a human body, or at least we only think it's a human body, but now they're dumb And so that's the lifeless.
Yeah, they can be in non-human bodies because remember they make the squirrel.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Lifeless squirrel.
Yeah.
And
I like the alliteration with these.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and also the lifeless are smarter than Vasher thinks.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Than
just
most people think.
Than most people think. Brandon was saying, it's not a good idea to keep all the lifeless in a dark cave. That's not a good idea. That the Hallandren do.
Yeah, does anyone want to do like a lifeless POV maybe? Like at some point?
Yeah, if with our steel.
Oh, the lifeless. Okay. Yeah, so you said that, and in my brain, I heard that as the returned are smarter than most people think, and I'm like,
I mean,
they're downplaying a lot.
And then who keeps the returned in a dark cave? Like what?
No, not those. No, the lifeless. There's a lot we can talk about with the lifeless. They have like a command phrase. So like once you create a lifeless, you don't need to put more breath into it, but you do need to keep them whole or else the breath will leak out of them and they'll die. So like you want to stitch them up. Well, right. The breath will leave, right? And then they will no longer be animated, right?
Because it's the breath that animates them. So
yeah.
I don't think it leaves. I just think it becomes less functional and you need to put more breath in like as it moves further. Because like breath is sticky. Breath doesn't accidentally like leak out of something. Yeah. It just becomes
it's the ichor alcohol that is leaking.
Yeah.
I guess otherwise they'll need a new breath. Yeah. But I mean, ichor alcohol isn't mandatory.
No, it just makes it last longer and keep in human shape longer. Yeah. So it reduces how often you need a new breath because people aren't rotting. I don't know if they rot like just generally or not, but if you don't put that in, they can't.
I imagine the breath sustains the body in this way.
Yeah. Or at least like largely, you know, like you probably get some like gross stuff growing on them, I guess.
Sure.
But
right. Yeah. Yep.
Type 3 has no cool alliterative phrase. Thanks, Vasher. But type 3 is just the like what everyone thinks of when they think awakening, which is you awaken cloth or you awaken straw and you give it like a task or like usually a pretty simple command, but they can end up being as complex as things like go find this object for me.
Find tunnels was one that was like, oh, right. Venice, I didn't know you could do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And actually, interesting thing that I learned from a WOB, these like when you give something like the little straw figure that can go find keys, they don't have eyes clearly, but they still can perceive things and they perceive the world similarly to the Inquisitors.
Yeah, I was reading that in our doc. I was like, that's what's a good question right there.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have type 4, which is our sentient objects, like Nightblood.
We've covered all 4 sections of the what is it called? The Punnett square?
Punnett square?
Yeah.
Not the punitive square.
No. Where on one axis we have object versus like deceased holes, and on the other we have sentient versus not.
Yeah, but I mean with lifeless, Vasher is not necessarily getting it right, and obviously Nightblood is special. I don't think Vivenna's sword, as we've talked about, is not as OP as Nightblood, but is presumably one of these type 4s.
I think more of the difference between type 1 and type 2 is like type 1, like it's a returned our cognitive shadows. You're like stapling the soul back into the body.
Right. Yes.
Whereas type 2, you're creating a facsimile. You're basically creating a new soul.
Yeah.
Right. Wait, 2 or 4? Are we talking about lifeless or are we talking about Nightblood?
I'm talking about lifeless.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. We just jumped quickly.
Yeah,
so
we did. That's okay. It's because I compared the 2.
Okay.
But yeah, you're totally right. It's not the same soul, whereas Return have the same soul, just like boosted by endowment, right?
But if you are made into a lifeless with your own breath, it's slightly better than if you use a different breath.
Makes sense.
Yep. So, and I imagine connection plays into all of this.
Oh, sure. Time. Yeah. It is interesting how breath is very interchangeable, though. Like, obviously, it's better if you do that, but it's not necessary. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it doesn't hard code any parts of your spirit web. It's just junk DNA, basically.
Maybe it has your identity.
But it would have your identity.
Well, actually, about identity, the whole awakening an object and only you can take the breath back is 100% exactly the same as that, for sure.
Basically, it gets attuned to your identity while you hold it. And so, like, if another person, you were to give it to someone else, like, it would attune to their identity, but an object's identity wouldn't override yours.
Right.
The act of giving your breath away with that special command probably like also does the identity transfer.
Yeah, I think so.
Probably.
Yeah, I don't think that's like a time
it's
thing.
like my life to yours, my breath become yours. That's like a pretty specific.
That's a good point. If you think about what the command means, it's like, the identity field is being recoded, as we've discussed, of course, before.
Oh God, the identity
field. The identity field.
Sometimes I remember the identity field, and I just get giddy.
I love it.
What episode was that? Was it the spiritual mumbo jumbo?
I think that was spiritual mumbo jumbo.
Probably. That had lots of good stuff in that one.
Quality episode. If you like the stuff, go listen to that episode again.
I mean, I think this is very cool to cast old magic systems with what we're doing now. It's like, oh, right. The feruchemy storing things in objects, exactly the same, which does have an interesting thing about, like, if you were an awakener that had an unsealed metal mind.
Well, like the ability to like dampen your own identity.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You could
also you think you might awaken something and then
anyone could take it.
Yeah. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's kind of
cool. Even just storing breath.
You can have the weird, like the rarest, most expensive game of like tag. Where a bunch of feruchemist awakeners awaken thing, and like that thing has to run to the next one, and then the second person retrieves the breath and like sends another object to the third one. And
well, I mean, it could just be as simple as you have a bank and you're storing tons of breath into a single object, and then you can have different employees grab it and or something. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Like you could do that with unsealed metal mines in this context, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's like, then because like when you die, your breath goes poof and is lost forever.
You could donate it to the breath bank.
Yeah. Or you could just like store your breath in a bank. And if you die, your descendants could still get your breath.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. That's really good.
Without having to give it to them.
Yeah. Because if you store it in an object and you're dead, then you're kind of screwed.
Yeah,
you have to do that. You have to prep that ahead of time. Those are kind of the basics, just solid like an hour into this, basics. But I think it's cool to go back and talk about these spiritual aspects about these things. So awakening is an neutral magic system, so you don't lose the breath in the process of awakening. And you can't awaken aluminum, which is not surprising at all. But
yeah. So basically, the investiture is coming from the user to like facilitate the magic, but like the actual like kinetic energy to like for that little straw thing to run around isn't coming from the breath.
Yeah, right. It's not.
That's coming from endowment.
Yeah, it has to be coming from endowment. Yeah, right. Right, because the breath isn't used in the process.
And like with feruchemy, like the actual like mechanics that allow you to transfer attributes into investiture and back is facilitated by preservation and ruin.
Right.
But the investiture that is functionally used comes from the user.
From the, I think, and positivity and neutrality and negativity need to be thought in the context of the invested artist, of the magic user, of the person performing the thing.
Yeah.
And so in Awakening, breath goes in, breath comes out. There's no loss or gain in that breath, even though actual work has been done, therefore, and neutral.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the color was expended because reasons, right? Like,
and aluminum doesn't get awakened because it's The dead material with no soul.
Yeah. Can I read a quick wob about
Let's do it.
the whole breath thing and like that?
Mhm.
Let's
It
do it.
applies to the
Let's-
end neutral thing.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Yeah, this is an older one, so it's paraphrased, but why is breath not consumed in Awakening, unlike most all other use of investiture? Not all investitures are used up. Much like energy, it isn't typically created or destroyed, just changes. With breath, and what it's used for, it is just more easily and readily recovered than in other forms. So it just doesn't really go away.
Yeah, there's another wob how like the power of endowment is just going to stick. Like it's very sticky. But you can also give it away. Whereas like Stormlight, it wants to be used. Right. So it's
Just
not
kinda
sticky.
It's,
Humans with breath, it doesn't decay out, whereas Kaladin, obviously, it drains quickly. Right.
yeah. Which like Stormlight was built in to be part of the entire ecosystem
Has to be
Of-
used frequently.
of the world. Yeah. So it's meant to be cycled.
Yep.
Mhm. A storm doesn't want to be contained.
No, it doesn't. Whereas endowment wants the power to be given. Here's another really interesting word of Brandon that like is actually really crazy. Is there any other magic types on the Warbreaker world? Brandon, there are different manipulations and manifestations of breath. Okay. Brandon, they're going to be much closer than like the Celis magic systems and things like that. So the deviation is much smaller, but it does manifest in slightly different ways, kind of a thing. Have we seen any? Ah, Rafa. It's like, oh,
Yeah,
that's interesting.
That's really interesting, right?
Like there is that one country where returned are like vampires.
Oh,
Well, but
yeah.
that's cultural.
Yeah.
We don't know that. We don't definitively know that, probably.
Huh.
Yeah.
All we know is that there's a country where returned are like vampires.
Yeah. I kind of could see like almost like the Awakening style vary from country to country. And there could be countries that are like, oh, we're all about lifeless, or countries that are really good at kind of getting all you can out of like the type 3 entities and like the more like the less concrete
Yeah.
awakenings. But
I wonder if there's like if you have maybe like briefer awakenings somewhere. So like the same idea as type 3, but like you give a little bit of breath to something. So like you don't fully awaken it. And it's quote unquote alive. It's awakened for only a brief period of time and just like goes and does a task and the breath dissipates or whatever, or the thing just powers down.
Yeah, I wonder how much of that is a different invested art or just different applications of Awakening. Like that is probably a philosophical thing that probably people in world would argue about, but because it's still apparently using breath, right? But
Yeah.
And it's much closer because like the Celish systems are obviously different magic systems. Like you're not gonna mistake an Elantrian for a blood sealer.
Yeah. But Brennan has also said that technically that's all one system.
yeah,
In the sense that you are using symbols that mimic the landscape to perform an effect. And so on Nalthis, it has to be much less dramatic than that.
yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
I feel like color will always be drained. You'll be using command. You're going to be using breath. You know what I mean? Like those principles probably hold no matter what.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I want to say, yeah.
From an outside perspective, it's like it might be hard for some people to like actually pick out those differences. I think if you're from like a Nalthian Awakener, that's like, oh yeah, like we're totally doing different things. But like a Rosharan is going to be like, you're literally doing the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we kind of had like a weird case where we don't know very much about the other countries on.
We
Nalthis,
really
like,
don't.
even
No.
like less than Cell even, and so we see the country where they don't do Awakening, and we see the country where they do all the Awakening. So
Yeah.
there's room in there for for people to take it to some different places.
I wonder if there's a place on Nalthis where, because like Awakening in Taitalir in Helandrin is very like individualistic. Like you are a person and you are doing awakening on an object or multiple objects. And so I wonder if there's like a multi-user awakening somewhere out there where people like get together, they pool their breaths together and like form something really interesting, like dramatically different from what the Halangent people can do.
So
That would be
Voltron.
cool.
Yeah, like
Sure, yeah.
like you
They come
have
together
a
in
different
Voltron.
command that like this piece does this specific function, and that is
Or
in,
maybe
like,
the fact that it's multiple people, like if they're all visualizing the same command, maybe that gives the creation like a greater understanding of the variety. Or maybe it's easier when like 50 people are going fetch keys and like they all have slightly different ideas of what fetch keys means, but like the core of it, kind of the common denominator of all of these intentions sticks to the awakened object, and it's much easier because you don't need everyone to have like a super clear idea. Or maybe you can have a much more advanced command that like 50 people are putting together.
I feel like this is vague because Brandon hasn't dealt with the details, but it's like, yeah, there's probably other things.
Well,
It's possible.
So Evgeni, like I think that's really cool, and I think that is a total possibility. But I also think it's a total possibility that like because there would be those slight variations, that it would just fail.
sure.
But
Yeah.
like I want it to be true because that is
Yeah.
that is.
I there are so many places on Nalthis. It's like Tedradel, right, David?
Yep.
Pan Unity.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Zaka,
Well,
you
the
know.
Pawn Unity is in
Hydrus?
Holland.
Yeah. Cuth,
Yeah, well, we'll see those. We will definitely see those.
or Huth and Kuth, depending on who you ask.
I say Huth and Kuth.
It sounds better than Huth and Cuth.
I say Huthenkuth.
Oh, just
You're the
get
worst.
out. Get out. I wanted to mention the Tears of Edgley because we should probably mention that. Edgley, whatever. I don't know.
Edgley.
Edgelord.
I think Brandon says Edgley, and so I've been training myself to say that.
Ah, good. That's what I say.
It's too late. It's been 2009. Like,
I always say Edgley. But people made
Edgley.
fun of me on this show, I think, for that.
Yeah, I started off as an Edgley type of guy, and then like somebody said Edgley, and I was like, hey, that sounds better. And now I'm going back to camp Edgley.
Edgley. But they only exist in Hallandren,
Yes.
and that's because the perpendicularity's there. Something.
It's
The
leaking.
perpendicularity is leaking.
It's leaking.
Yeah, it's a similar situation to Atium, right? Where
With the
Loosely?
pits, sort of.
Yeah.
I would say
Probably.
sort of.
It's like the towers,
a little bit in the physical.
the tiers like require that investiture juice in the soil. So like even if like you take like seeds and you plant them in soil elsewhere, they're not going to grow.
Mhm.
Right, yeah. But you don't need the dyes made from the tears to awaken.
Mhm.
They're just much more potent for
Yeah.
awakening.
Well, it's like they're just make vibrant colors.
Right.
So
I
So,
don't
like,
know
I
if
don't-
it's just that.
That's true.
Yeah. It does say
I don't
like
think we can definitively say either way. I
No.
don't think Brandon has indicated that there is anything more beneficial to the tiers than just the color.
Mhm.
Sure. I'm just saying it is reasonable to think either way. It's not
Yes.
There's probably weird crap you can do with the tears if you have them, but like
Mhm.
specifically, I don't know.
Yeah.
God things
it
are
is-
weird.
Yeah, well, it's weird too because it is kind of like it connects back to like a thing that Brandon doesn't talk about much, where like the things that get consumed in magic systems in theory are returning. Like he's kind of mentioned in Wobbs that metals come back to Scadrial in some
Right.
way that he's not willing to talk
He's
about.
waffled on that a lot.
I don't like
These
that
are like
at all.
decade-old wobs. Too.
Yeah, it's true.
It's like
It's true.
These
It's
are real
been,
old.
it's been something since 2011, so
Yeah.
who knows? But
He's like
Uh,
gone back and forth a couple times on the metals.
But I do
I'm sticking with
wonder I do wonder if there are like other non-awakening things you can do with the tiers that are interesting.
Oh, absolutely. I would assume so.
Well,
You could have an interesting cup of tea with it.
No. Yes, that is true. I like because that touches on whether the actual flowers are invested in any way or not. Like, is it?
They are.
Well, if they are, then I don't understand why you think it's just the purely physical nature of the dyes that's.
What I'm saying is there is no indication that investiture applies a benefit to Awakening by default.
PedantiCast, welcome to the show, Ian.
100% these flowers are invested. It's like they require investiture to exist.
Yeah,
I don't think that, like, obviously there's investiture involved with them.
Yeah, no. I get where you're coming from. I'm just astounded that you don't think that this investiture plays a role in the efficiency when using these dyes.
I think it's a possibility. But there is no hard and fast.
No, there isn't. But I'm just astounded it's not the difference for you.
Thanks, guys. This is some high quality stuff right here.
Like, from what we understand, like, Awakening requires breath, command, and color. Like, the flowers are invested.
Okay, I'm glad we agree on that.
Objects that are dyed with dyes created from them, it's just like you're like a couple steps removed. That I was like, I don't know if there's actually an effect here.
But invested flower means invested dye.
Means invested object.
Means
that's just like a few steps. Like, I'm not comfortable making these assumptions.
Let's move on.
Yeah.
Noted. This is half shards all over again. I can't wait.
And circling back to something we touched on earlier, we've got a wob from Toronto's that is paraphrased that says, if a person were tapping connection, would their language for awakening change? And Brandon said, if the connection is strong enough, then yes. Otherwise, no.
Interesting. I think that's cool.
I think interesting is about as much as I can say about this.
I mean, it's interesting to see how those connections go.
Yeah, I think it's because in Dalinar's visions, the language he is speaking is fundamentally different. Like,
yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in that case, like, his awakening would be the new language. Outside of the visions, when he's just doing like the touchy thing and taking a language, that would not change it to an extent.
Oh, I disagree. I think what Dalinar is doing in the vision is identical to what he's doing in real life, and that's how he learned to do it. Like,
I think what's going on in the vision is a much more powerful effect.
Oh, okay.
Because like with like outside with the touchy thing, like he knows he's speaking a different language.
I mean, he knows because people are now because he now understands people that he didn't understand previously.
Yeah, like he couldn't not know.
It's not like the language feels different in his mouth. Like, to his own ears, he's still speaking Alethi. The only reason he knows it's not Alethi is because the Aesir are responding to him.
But like he can switch. Like, it's not like automatic, because like in the visions, I don't think he could speak Alethi. He can only speak whatever ancient language they're speaking.
I don't know. I'm not really interested in going down this path any further. But
that's true. Me either. This sounds like a long tangent. But I do want to get to an important tangent.
Let's do it.
That there's some weirdness with Awakening that we haven't talked about. Like there's the color stuff. We could maybe talk about that a little more. But there's one scene of a very different sort of command. There is a scene where Vasher and Vivenna save a priest's daughter. And let's read what this sounds like, and they pass from shanties to tenements to decent homes on tree-lined streets with burning lanterns. As they reach the mansions, Vasher paused on the street, setting the girl down. "Child," he said, "I'm going to say some words to you. I want you to repeat them. Repeat them and mean them." The girl regarded him absently, nodding slightly. He glanced at Vivenna, back away. She opened her mouth to object, but she thought better of it. She stepped back out of earshot. Fortunately, Vasher was near a lit street lamp, so she could see him well. He spoke to the little girl, and she spoke back to him. After opening the cage, Vivenna had taken the breath back from the thread. She hadn't stowed it somewhere else. And with the extra awareness she had, she thought she saw something. The girl's biochromatic aura, the normal one that all people had, flickered just slightly. It was faint, yet with the first heightening, Vivenna could have sworn she saw it. And basically, the girl does not remember the trauma that happened there. Mm-hmm. And Vasher later says to Denth, "I know the commands that will make you forget about what you did." And Denth refuses them. Because he's like, "No, I can't do that." This is super different than everything we talked about what Awakening does.
Mm-hmm. So earlier when we were talking about different applications or manifestations of Awakening, this is actually what I was thinking. I just didn't want to spoil the fact that we were going to talk about this.
Right, that's true.
This feels like non-Halandrian Awakening to me.
You're using breath to do totally different effects.
Yeah.
That Halandrian are calling Awakening, but like you could probably argue is not formal Awakening.
I seriously wonder whether this is a different magic system.
Magic system's a weird word, but like you're not doing this to objects. So like I definitely see what you're saying. Like you're using breath totally differently.
And he's also not doing it himself. Like it is the girl who is performing this thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, which probably has something to do with like, the general inability of people to mess with other people's stuff. You know what I mean?
Probably, yeah.
Like,
yeah.
And so correct. Like the command, whatever the command or commands are, probably has something to do with like overriding either part of your spiritual or cognitive so that these memories are either inaccessible or overwritten or erased or something to that effect.
I wonder how similar it is to what the Night Watcher did to Dalinar. Because they came back. They weren't gone.
Technically, I would say nothing like, because the Night Watcher didn't do anything to Dalinar.
You win.
PedantiCast.
Got him.
Yeah, wow. It's kind of important that
we only spent 8 years being told that the Night Watcher did it to Dalinar. My apologies.
Hard to say. I mean, Vasher, when telling it to Denth at the end, Vasher was pretty sure it'd be permanent, but like, how would he know?
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to get at more like, is this like putting a memory in a copper mind and it's just inaccessible, or is it like in there but unreachable? Like those are the kind of the two various paradigms we've seen for memory loss in the Cosmere.
Yeah,
I think it could easily be either one.
Totally.
Mm-hmm. And there could be potential for both within this spectrum of effects.
Yeah,
is depending on what command you use.
It's so interesting. You're using your own breath to say a command that presumably you don't need to visualize particularly well.
Yeah.
Right? Like if Vasher just is like, repeat these words, you have to intend them, capital I intent there, right? You do have to mean them, but like the visualization component might be less pronounced, and you're doing it to yourself. And that's very different. Thinking about allomancy, right? There's external effects and internal effects. So like all the awakening that we just were talking about are all like external awakening. And maybe this is some sort of like internal awakening sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So on
Okay.
that note, I was going to say this is different from most of the Awakening we've seen
Yeah.
because you are doing something to yourself.
Right.
And so the visualization component of the mental command doesn't maybe have to be as powerful because you are like, you don't need to explain to your, like, you don't need to imprint a vision of
Right.
the thing you want to happen to yourself because you are already yourself.
That's true. That makes sense. If we're like saying
and-
that we're implanting a cognitive aspect to an object, right? Like you're doing it to yourself, so that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And what it feels a little bit similar to me is kind of the most basic command, the one that transfers breath, which is also in its core internal command.
Transferring
My
your
breath to
breath.
yours. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is in fact something that the other person has no control over.
That's true.
Yeah. That has always been kind of like the odd duck in the commands is the
That is the
transferring
weirdest.
one.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if
it's
it's like
foreshadowing.
fundamental in this way.
Yeah, but this is crazy. Like you use it, but your breath isn't expended. It's flickering. So like maybe it's changing the effect, the strength of that breath, right? So presumably that breath that girl had is now weaker, I guess.
It doesn't necessarily say that. It says it flickers. It doesn't say it dim.
Yeah,
I
it just
thought-
flickered just slightly.
Okay.
So it's like that could be part of it, or it could be like that breath went away for like a fraction of a second to do whatever it needed to do, and then it was
And
immediately
came back. Oh yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point.
That's how I was reading it as well.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Or not even went away, but like weakened, like pulsed a little bit.
Mhm.
But I guess flickering like a lamp is probably, or a light bulb is probably closer to the intent here.
Mhm.
I guess it. Vivenna's like immediate follow up to that part is kind of her thinking, but I thought you couldn't cut up a breath. So at least like her like reaction to what she saw was something was just done with a fraction of a breath, not the breath got lighter and then came back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it
She could be wrong because Vivenna is
Yeah.
not an expert, but yeah.
But also Brandon is putting that there and it's a one-off type of thing. So like
Mhm.
it feels weird to misdirect.
It feels
About
weird that there would be a
career.
strength of breath thing, and like that feels like, I imagine it must be slightly weaker, and maybe it could like
Mhm.
like get stronger again with time. Like I think that's totally reasonable, but we don't really know how the strength of breath, other
Yeah.
than the usual use of Awakening, really works.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I just think if it just got weaker, like using a fraction of a breath, like flicker isn't the word I would use to describe
It would dim.
that.
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I just thought it was interesting how Vasher was like, I want you to walk away, Vivenna. Like he was like, I don't want you to hear what I'm going to tell her. Like he was really all about like not giving Vivenna any insight into this command and he's kind of seen her start to play around with things on her own after having watched him. So I feel like this is either he thinks she's going to like wipe her own memory by accident, or he's like, I don't want you messing around with this stuff.
It's probably a dangerous thing to experiment with, which actually is very interesting. Like, Vasher, what did you do to experiment with this? You know?
Oh,
Yeah. Did he remove his own memory after he remembered who he was?
That's actually an interesting idea, that you do forget who you were. But
Yeah,
actually,
as a return.
as a return, that's actually a lot like the cultivation memories going away. But like Lightsong did remember it at the end, right? So it is kind of like that.
Well, at the very
Interesting.
end, was it after he gave his breath or was it just before
It
that?
was
just
just
before.
before. He remembered everything, including his conversation with Endowment,
Okay.
with her asking him if he wanted to return.
Okay.
Oh, this is spicy. Spicy. I knew this
Okay,
would be so good.
What kind of metal is copper in ferrochemy?
It's
Is it a
memory.
Cognitive.
Cognitive?
Yeah, cognitive.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. What type? Yeah, cognitive. What else do you want to know about the chart? Do I want to bring it over? I got it over there. It's not mounted. It's just to the side of the allomantic table. I've never put up the tables properly in this new place, but
Well, you got to put the foam
yeah.
tiles up.
I'm trying to think, like, if we try to draw a parallel between what Vasher does, or really the little girl does, and ferrochemical copper, I'm trying to see if we can determine what the command could be, at least on a very high level, because it obviously we are like reaching here, but if copper is a cognitive metal, which it obviously is, then the command is probably not about modifying identity.
Yeah. It does seem
which
like
is I thought I had, and
Sure.
so it's probably a cognitive-ish, like
Effect.
something that does something to your cognitive aspect, not to your spiritual aspect necessarily.
I agree.
Yeah, I feel like if you're messing with spiritual aspect stuff, then the chance for damage is much higher. Right?
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I guess I'm on this internal awakening thing where you could even like awaken your own body to do like a physical effect. Why would it need to be a cognitive effect? I don't know how that would work. I don't know what that would involve.
Basically,
Like, use breath
use
into yourself.
to make it like you're holding Stormlight, because that does boost strength. Or
Do you think just like the way the returned changed shape?
No, I was thinking like you could use it to have like your hands to grip much better or something in particular, like an actual sort of like you're changing your actual physical self somehow.
Okay.
I don't know.
Idea. What about how, if it ties into how the Idrian royal family can change their appearance and how they stoke the fragment of the divine breath inside them?
That's true. We haven't even talked about that dimension. Oh, yeah, that's true.
So like that could be some sort of physical, like they're manipulating their own breath to do some sort of physical change.
Yeah, that's true.
that,
That's a good point.
yeah,
But that is because they are descendants of a returned, isn't it?
The first
Yeah, but like I'm just
is.
saying, like it, like if we're looking at a paradigm for what I'm using paradigm a lot, but like what these powers could look like.
Sure.
That's like a physical change we see that someone can do by manipulating their own breath.
and that might tie into like how they don't require like a vocal component, like because they are descended from
Oh, that's an interesting
returned,
point.
like it's more like instinctual, which
true.
like
And
isn't really a thing in the Cosmere very often. So,
instinctual stuff?
well, like no, just because like it's in your blood. I don't know.
Oh, that's sort of, yeah, right. I see what
That
you're
kind of divide. Instinctual stuff definitely 100%
Yeah.
in the Cosmere, but
Yeah, they definitely do get benefits from, like, I think Pavena is better at, she's better at intuiting commands because of her little fragment of a divine breath, Vasher says at
Must
one
be.
point.
And she, like, maybe not to the extent, but like similarly to the returned, has changed shape. She looks like an Alethi woman on Roshar.
Mhm.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, so she's clearly done things.
the Idrian royal family, their breaths aren't like noticeably different from other breaths.
There's no
There's-
indication.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's like
Ceres is strong, so like who
Yes.
knows if that, like maybe that adds something, that could be something, but
yes, but it's not unusually strong. It's just like
Right.
you are strong within the normal bounds of having a breath.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
So the assumption we're operating on is, or that I've been operating on rather, is that a divine breath is just a really, really big breath.
Yeah.
So at that point, would being descended from a returned actually make a difference? If your breath is still the same size as within normal bounds as everybody else's breath, but your breath is still different.
it's got to be
Because-
qualitatively somehow.
So like there has to be something different about divine breaths.
Well, and it's super weird also because it's only people who actually inherit who get it. Like there's other Cosmere mumbo
Yeah,
jumbo with
that is true.
right? Like,
Well,
Yeah, and divine breaths can't be used like regular breaths generally too, you know,
Yeah,
like they
I was
can't be
gonna
given
say,
away in the same way
divine
generally.
breath is definitely qualitatively different. because you can use it to heal.
Yeah.
Well, could you figure out how to heal with Awakening?
Well, that is a more external use, so that wouldn't be using it on yourself, but like I think that's possible. I suppose what I was thinking is the effect with the royal locks and stuff and any other physical manipulations, that's like a regular breath, but could you use more breath to change your body more extreme? Like I think that could be possible rather than just like a single breath. I think that's totally possible. I don't know what it would look like. I was just raising the possibility that there's some awakening like thing that you could do to yourself to have more extreme differences. With
like short of like Aeondor, which is the most OP of all magic systems, Awakening, I think, is the most... The Awakening we have discovered in this podcast has the most like implications for like manipulating your spirit web.
It's almost like self-hemalurgy almost.
Yeah.
It's like you're manipulating your own, you could theoretically manipulate your own spirit web or something.
I was thinking of it as closer to stamping, soul forging.
Yeah, I think that's a fine metaphor as well. Sure.
Yeah.
But like, it's really interesting, Vivenna looking like an Alethi. I could definitely imagine that with her in particular, having the royal locks and then maybe a bunch of more breath, she could figure something out that Vasher couldn't because she has the royal locks, right? But Denth would maybe know about that because he had the royal locks.
True. But they were returned though. So like all their like investigations that they discovered were them acting as returns. Like they didn't have a chance to be a regular person and learn how to manipulate their form.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, I have wondered in the past how much of a difference there is between a returned who is an awakener and a normal person who is one. Like whether there are things that are completely out of the realm of possibility for one of these people, but not the other, right? Because obviously we've thought about the changing of appearance as kind of a return thing because, well, Vasher does it, and he kind of says that, hey, this is a thing that returned do, or at least implies that it's a thing that they do. But now that we've seen Vivenna, who is admittedly, she has the royal locks and is descended from a return, so maybe that still plays a factor there, but it could be that it's just breath, and like some things are easier for one group than the other, but they're all doable. Because we haven't really seen, I mean, obviously Awakening is very unique among the magic systems that we've seen, because like allomancy and feruchemy and hemalurgy is weird on its own way, but surge binding, they're all very like discrete magic systems when it comes to the effects that they can do. Like, one, you have to become a magic user, and then two, you have this set of abilities, and what you can do is entirely determined by the abilities that you're given and how much you practice and things like that. But with Awakening, with everyone being a potential being an awakener, really, is just that you can't do much with a single breath. Maybe the rules are different there, and like, who knows?
It's very open-ended. This is making me very excited for. I know, like, we'll only get a Nightblood thing, but it's like, oh my god, there's so much depth to what you could do here. Yeah. But clearly, the scene about the memory thing, that's a seed for the future. That's like, it's not relevant for this book, really, but like, it's something that Brandon wants to do. That is sequel bait or something. And really, Stormlight is all a sequel for this. But
it ties into like. During Vasher's conversation with Vivenna, it's like, there's so much we don't know. And then later on, it's just like, there's this weird thing that doesn't make sense with what he told us. But obviously it's a thing.
Yeah, it's very well done. Like, it's a nice little seed to get everybody going, like, what? And then...
Yeah.
And because it's so small, it's like, it can be easy to forget about.
Yes, this
Ironically.
honestly, yeah, this is honestly the whole reason I wanted to do this podcast. Is like, hey, remember that super freaking weird thing? Like, we got to talk about Awakening, and mostly this, but we did need groundwork to talk about how weird this was, and I'm so glad we had this word of Brandon about different manifestations, because it's like, look, you clearly, if you know the right command, you don't need extra breath to do some stuff with it. If you know the right thing, but it's probably just super hard if you just have a single breath to figure those commands out. Whereas, you know, when you're upper in the Heightenings, then you'll be able to figure that out a lot easier. Right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know what else is really weird?
What's that?
The fact that the Idrian royal family, their hair, the royal locks, change appearance kind of instinctually based on the emotion that the person is feeling.
Yeah.
Like, this is not mental command kind of thing.
No.
Although Siri can, although they can override that emotion with like will.
Yeah. That also reminded me, as we were talking about the Returned, how like how they see themselves is how their physical appearance looks, right? And so that has like some realmatic implications.
Yeah,
well,
and the cultural standards of beauty even too, they mention, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Man, this is great. I love the Warbreaker world. Like, we got just a taste. It's just like, oh, give us more.
Yeah.
But like, as of open-ended magic systems though, like Awakening has a lot, but as you were saying that, the other open-ended magic world is Cell, right? Like, there's tons of crap that you can do in Cell, but it takes a lot more study, right? But like, theoretically, you could do anything, right? With enough power.
Or most overpowered magic system when you're in Elangis.
When you're in Elangis. And prepared.
Yes.
Give me time to read before our encounter, and then I will kick your butt and prepare just the right Aeon. So this is relevant to our conversation. Questioner, with Awakening, given that you know the correct command word, could you potentially give anything to the other person using Awakening? Brandon, using Awakening, it has to be related to the fundamental aspects of investiture. Bystander, which are... How would we find out what those are? Brandon, how would you find out what those are? Spend time researching the Cosmere and stuff. But the fundamental aspects of investiture is interesting there.
So my perception is basically anything you can store with Furukami or steal with Hemalurgy would be fundamental aspects of investiture.
Yeah.
There might be more out there, but those are pretty safe.
Like manipulating mental things, like you could manipulate spiritual attributes. I think that's totally
That's kind of where
possible.
my head goes. Is like, you know, fortune, identity, like that kind of stuff is like the very overt fundamental aspects of investiture.
But like memory and like warmth, I guess.
Yeah, you know, fundamental.
Hypothetically.
But like,
I think those would be harder.
Like that cognitive warmth.
It's interesting though. Like, you could awaken another human who's still alive. Oh, awaken, air quotes, right? Not formal awakening, but like using breath to have an effect on a living person, maybe. But it is weird because then you get identity issues, right? And like breath investiture and interfering with other investiture. So it definitely feels like what Vasher's doing with the girl, she's using her own breath to have an effect is a lot easier. I mean, maybe if you have like a ridiculous amount of heightenings, you can overpower it, just like the Lord Ruler can overpower pushing on metals in a person, right? But
or there could be specific commands that are designed to circumvent that.
Well, that's terrifying. That's a good point. There could be a command for literally whatever Brandon wants there to be in the story.
Your breath to mine. Your life become mine.
Sucks to be you.
So Vampire Returned.
That's the corrupted endowment version, you know, for the unmade.
Sure.
When they go to Nethys, obviously. Easy. when Odium comes there. Goodness. Oh my god. We're at 153.
Yeah, we don't have to like hit the color stuff. Like I just kind of threw in a bunch of like things we could go off on a tangent on. So like
we kind of have talked about the color weirdness. I don't know how much that's just going to involve us spinning in a circle anyway, to be honest.
Yeah.
What else do you guys want to talk about, if anything? That the memory thing is a weird other dimension. Guys, we've done plenty of episodes on Nightblood. You can go look those. We're just gonna gloss over all that right now.
Yeah.
Not very related to this, but when Graphic Audio was doing an adaptation of Warbreaker, there was at least one place where there was a difference with the published book, and that was in the command that Vasher used to awaken the rope that he uses a lot, the one that's I think on his belt. And the command he uses is my breath to give for life to live. And so somebody asked whether this was canon because this is now different, and whether Vasher needs to like be careful with his commands when he awakens so he doesn't accidentally give his divine breath to an object. And Brandon makes some non-committal noises and eventually says that he thinks this would be canon.
Yeah, but it's not in the regular book.
Yeah.
Oh, so I guess he's putting stuff like all of his non-divine breath into the rope, so he would just look like a normal human.
Yeah,
because he's suppressing the divine breath. I think that's what it is, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
I think that's what it is. He's going incognito
because it's not like normal awakening. Like obviously, like he can awaken regular things, but it's just he's not using my life to yours, my breath become yours, and then just like zoop all of the the breath going into that, and then he's dead, right?
Yeah. Bad news for Vasher.
Dead at the end of the week.
Well, wait, but he does that to Denth. He gives breath away to Denth at the end, but he's not.
Yeah, presumably he
with
the
regular
command.
with his regular command.
I don't know.
Yeah, he totally does. It's not a different command.
No, I'm not like disagreeing with you. I'm just saying I don't know about that.
Yeah, but like why would that be different than putting it into the rope?
Yeah, I'm gonna say it's not. I'm gonna discount the graphic audio thing.
I'm gonna discount the graphic audio thing as well because Vasher very clearly gives all of his breath except his divine breath to Denth at the end of Warbreaker.
So it's probably just like a visualization, mental like intent type of thing, where when you are giving your breath away, you just have to be mindful of not to give your divine breath.
Yeah, and Brandon does say that like he need to check with Isaac and Peter on that, and that like it's entirely possible that it could be canon, but like it's not definitive yet. I don't believe we have had any follow up.
No.
That would
so let's stick to the written word.
Yeah,
which we always do exclusively.
Yeah, I can't wait for audio originals, guys.
They're not.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but it'll just be a lot harder to find specific things.
Yeah.
Like that's more what I'm complaining about. Like my own personal issue listening to audiobooks aside, it will just be harder for us to find things that we want to look at.
They'll have to do ebooks of it though. Brandon's usually good about accessibility. You know what I mean? Like there are people who won't be able to listen to an audio only story.
Yeah, but they will probably come later.
Yes, they will probably come later.
Well,
but I know that the White Sand graphic audio edition came into existence because Brandon realized that a graphic novel is not a friendly medium for everybody.
Any final Awakening thoughts? I know we could probably go like another hour, but talking about other vague weirdness, like with divine breaths and stuff. But I think we got a lot of the core Awakening here.
I think it's worth mentioning that we haven't really gone into like the cultural.
No, we didn't. This was a hardcore magic episode for sure.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, like, just any other outstanding questions. I'm still interested in how Vasher has managed to apparently be one of the earlier people to figure out the whole location problem and leave Nalthis. Like,
That's a good point,
relatively early.
Because he's a cognitive shadow, yeah.
Yeah, with a splinter
Well-
that could in theory anchor him.
Yeah, but also he could be weird, or like returned could be weird in that regard. Because
Yeah.
I guess.
with Kelsier, I can very much see the problem because he was like juiced up by the Well of Ascension directly.
Well,
But they were juiced up by endowment directly.
yeah,
and,
but
like,
Kelsier doesn't
the
have his
fused are-
original body, right?
Yeah, and the
Whereas-
fused are stuck, and the heralds would appear to be bound to Rashar as well. You know, like other cognitive shadows that we see do have that problem, and so at the very least, it's either
Okay.
notable that the return don't, or that Vasher has figured out how to circumvent it.
Yeah, true.
Okay.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, fair.
There's a lot of details on specific biochromatic entities. It's like about the returned and the first returned and things like that, and the royal
Yeah.
locks. There's a bunch of weird stuff here that we don't really know about.
Yeah, the returned are kind of almost as big a separate topic as Nightblood is.
Kinda.
Oh,
yeah.
100%.
We
Yeah.
should do one. I mean, we kind of talked about it in the Cognitive Shadows podcast, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But
Because,
that is
like,
a good point.
They're their own thing because, like, are they technically even awakening?
Yeah, I would probably say that no, right? Like that's
Yeah.
totally different than the invested art, right? Like if we
Mhm.
think about what mortals can do, like only endowment could do that, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of the return, reminded me there's a line in the text, and I don't remember if it was. I think it was Vivenna speaking with Vasher and saying that Austrism teaches that Austri commands the returned to come back to life.
Mhm.
So we know, or at least it is heavily implied, that the returned come back with a purpose.
Yeah.
Endowment, some people perish, and endowment goes, no, I got stuff for you to do.
Yeah.
And if that person agrees, then they come back as returned.
Mhm.
Right.
And their memories get taken away and all that. There's a big parallel here between Awakening, where Awakeners are giving a command to an object or a deceased host to do something, and Austri doing the same, or Endowment doing the same thing to people who are about to return.
Mhm.
I think that this is probably more of a cultural thing that they know the word command. Like
Mhm.
it's a nice parallel, and I think it is a correct parallel. But endowment's not doing like a formal command, right? Like it's a different higher level thing that's much more subtle than like a simple command. And it's like,
Sure.
right?
It's an interesting way to look at it, though.
Mhm.
Like to have the returned be like awakened objects of a shard, essentially. You know,
Essentially, like lifeless, but
a shard lifeless.
yeah.
Something like that.
Maybe there are parallels. Like maybe there is a venue we can take this where we gain a better understanding on how the lifeless work if we think of them as a downscaled version of the returned.
I think there's a fundamental difference there that has nothing to do with the shard.
I agree
Oh.
because it's the same body and the same
Oh.
soul. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's
Is it?
same soul, but like the shadow of the same soul. Okay, like, is the cognitive shadow a copy or not? Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the difference between a cognitive shadow and an artificial soul.
I'm
Yeah.
not saying there's a direct parallel that we can derive, but maybe there's a thematic one that gives us a better insight, or at least a different way to think about the lifeless.
Mhm.
That
Possibly.
may lead to something.
Well, like
I fundamentally, I just don't think this is anything more than cultural like comparisons. Like,
Sure.
I don't think this is a command. Like, I don't think endowment is giving them a compulsion to do anything. She is
Well, no.
giving them an opportunity, which
it's
is
much more
fundamentally
like
different than
cultivation in Dalinar, it feels like.
Yeah,
Like, it
it's
really
like a
feels
more
like that.
philosophical thing than it is like
Yeah.
they are compelled. Like Vasher obviously wasn't compelled to do anything in particular because he still doesn't know why he returned. But
Interesting note on the lifeless that I want to bring up is that after the events of Warbreaker, Jules, who was in love with Arsteel, who is the lifeless Claude, was going to bring Arsteel's corpse to Yeasteel, the other the fifth scholar, if you will. And Jules hoped that Yeasteel, with his Mastery of Lifeless, could bring back some of Arsteel's personality and memories, which is very interesting. Like, there is a lot of depth to Lifeless that we don't have.
But fundamentally, I don't think whatever Yeasteel is going to be able to do, like, that's not going to end up being a cognitive shadow of Arsteel.
I disagree, because I think that we know something persists in the spiritual realm, and you could potentially, because Dalinar talked to Evie, and you could potentially pattern a weak cognitive shadow off of that spiritual remnant.
Whoa.
I think there is a
talk. You know, awake enough to have an emotion of forgiveness.
There's also a wob on Reddit about, like, Brandon was talking about something, and I asked about how death works in the Cosmere, and he talked about essentially like two phases or two stages of death. One where first the physical body dies, and then you're left with cognitive plus spiritual, and then the cognitive either dies or gets destroyed or gets sucked into the beyond, and then you're still left with like the spiritual
corpse
aspect. Corpse.
Yeah. But the mind is gone.
Yes, but the mind is not the whole deal, right?
Yeah, there's a lot left there to work with if you get the other two parts.
Identity.
Yeah.
All your connections.
Yes. I definitely think you could do something. I just don't think you can do a cognitive shadow once your mind has gone into the beyond. Okay. Fundamentally, that's not a cognitive shadow.
I think all of these things with Nightblood, the book Nightblood, and all of these discoveries will be very cool given our much more expansive Cosmere knowledge. I think that all that stuff will be very interesting.
It is almost upsetting that we're only getting one sequel to Warbreaker.
Yeah.
After this podcast, I am kind of upset, actually. It's like, what about on, like, at Zaka or Tetradil? I want to know
these things in places.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do Who's That Cosmere Character?
This character is from Roshar.
Menace.
Tien.
Tom.
Mraze.
Void in drag on a horse.
It's time for Who's That Cosmere Character? Welcome to Who's That Cosmere Character, the game show where you send 5 clues and a character to WTCC at 17shard.com. We will read the clues out loud, and these guys will need to guess who's that Cosmere character. And also, feel free to send in questions to WTCC at 17shard.com, and we'll eventually do like a Q&A segment at some point. So if you have questions, we'll do that sometime. All right. Clue 1. I don't know. I don't run this. I don't have access to this email because usually Ben and Grace do this. So I have no idea. Clue 1. This character wears a funny hat.
Parlin. Parlin.
No.
Wayne.
No.
Parlin was good. That was a solid.
Parlin was good. Yeah, that was a solid guess. That was solid.
I could just see Ben going like, "Oh, Awakening podcast. I'll make it themed," or Grace.
That implies you think Ben remembers who Parlin is, which I think is very optimistic.
Yeah. Well, depending on what the later clues are, it could be.
I will say the Grand Vizier Nura.
No. Clue 2. This character is a fugitive.
Is it Shy from the Emperor's Soul?
No.
That was what I was thinking.
Oh,
thanks for guessing that. I was like, who's a fugitive at any point? Does Kaladin ever wear a funny hat? No, that's not Kaladin.
Kaladin would like stare a funny hat to death, and it would like be set on fire or something.
So it would like form into a funny hat and like put it on his head, and he would be like, "Okay, I hate
He
this."
could have a funny hat on his head, but he would not be wearing it. Wearing it implies a choice.
True, yeah.
I don't know.
pay attention to anything
Okay,
I just
I
said.
don't agree with that usage of the word aware. Just
Keep
for
in mind,
the
Eric.
record. No,
Okay. A fugitive who wears a funny hat.
I don't have a
Raiden.
no, it's not Raiden.
Okay.
I don't have a name for this character, but
Okay.
I'll give a description and we'll see if that's enough.
Okay, I'm excited.
Early in Edge Dancer,
Okay.
when Lift goes to, was it Yida?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yida? She hides in the wagon of
Uh-huh.
a merchant,
Huh.
I think grain merchant.
It's like stolen it. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
and the guard thinks that the grain is stolen. I'm guessing that merchant.
No.
Okay.
I was hoping we just go on like a long form retelling of Edge Dancer really quick.
Let's recap. So and now for the real podcast where we talk about Edge Dancer. Welcome. Clue 3. This character can change their appearance.
Hoyd specifically in his guise as the Imperial Fool because he is a fugitive from Shy.
We don't know if he has a funny head though.
It's not Hoyd.
Shalon.
Fools have funny hats. Come on.
It's very
You're
silly.
assuming.
It is not Shalon.
Damn. Because her hat's kind of floppy. It's funny.
Arklo.
No. Clue 4. This character has a lot of sisters.
Oh, that should probably do it. Like, I bet that's pretty good.
Is it Syl?
It is Syl.
Oh,
And clue 5 was this character is not human.
clever. That was a good one.
I was thinking of Sio and I was trying to fit her in the clues.
Yeah, he wears a funny hat and shades more.
Okay,
Yeah.
And it's a future.
Okay, we have to beat Ian on the second round because this
All right.
can't be a shutout.
Well, good luck with that. Character number 2. This character is dead. I will qualify that is dead in the present time of the most recent story in whatever book we're referring to.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, dead is a tricky concept.
Yeah. Well, like, we would consider this character to be dead.
Light Song.
No.
Lynn Devar.
No.
Gavilar.
No. Clue 2. This character has killed many people.
Oof.
Ben.
No. that totally fits the clues. Yes,
Yeah.
that's true.
Denth.
No. How many return can we guess?
I
Could be
mean,
Shishara. She killed a lot of people.
That's true.
She
She
did.
had to.
and she's dead.
And
Yeah.
she's
very
dead. Very dead.
She died twice. That's as dead as you can get.
Well, I mean, technically you can't be deader than a fused who's died many, many, many times.
True.
And on that
They're
note,
still around, so
Jezrien.
No, it's not Jezrien. I like it though. I'm not. Clue 3. This character is remembered.
Well, I'm glad they would have, if they're dead, someone would have to remember them in order for them to appear. Is it like a tricky, like, remembering use of, like, remembering in the context of forgery? And you're like, oh, they're remembered. I don't think so.
Don't make that too weird.
I'm gonna say Silence Montaigne's grandmother.
No, but I like that.
Okay, dead.
So what do we have? Dead.
What clue are we on? Is this 2?
Clue 3.
3.
What was the middle
2
one?
was killed many people,
Okay.
which does help.
Yeah.
I mean, if you weren't killed.
Yeah. Killed many people, and it's themselves dead,
Yes.
and it's remembered.
Yes.
Okay. What about the Lord Ruler?
Well, that's a
Rashek?
good guess, but it is not the Lord Ruler. I like it.
We got a lot of kills in.
He did get many kills in. His kill streak very high.
Oh, I have a good one. I have a good guess.
Ooh.
Yeah, I don't.
Eerie.
Is Nightblood dead?
No.
What is being alive? What is death?
80.
Clue 4. This character wielded a shard blade.
Oh.
What was your guess that you would have guessed?
Helaron.
It is not Helaron.
I was going to guess the King of Silnasen that killed his
Oh,
entire
yeah.
family and then
Non-Ket.
died at the feet.
Yeah,
Wow.
I know who you're talking about.
That's obscure.
That is very obscure. I think he's
But
come up before in
remember-
this show, actually.
Gavalar?
I'm pretty sure Gavilar was already guessed, so no. Still.
For this?
Yes.
Yes.
He was my first guess.
Oh. So that was the last question.
No. I know, it's hard.
Do they have to stay dead? Or it just has died?
Is dead.
Is dead.
My
Okay.
impression is that they are currently dead.
Okay, I'm just like, Seth fits that profile very strongly.
In
If
the
it's
original
not- if
Words
it
of Radiance
has
or the
died.
retconned Words of Radiance?
There's a lot of dying involved.
Was he dead or was he just like sorta dead?
Nearly
Who
dead.
knows? So, in the version where they cut his head off with a shard blade, he died.
That got retconned.
Ian's like reaching deep into the memory banks right now.
Stare at the books.
Shard blades.
Sure.
Who has shard blades?
Not that many people.
The Knights Radiant. The Heralds. There's still 9 more Heralds to guess.
It's true.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to think. I'm gonna help you out, Ian. Let me think of people.
Have you guessed?
Yes.
I did, yeah. I guessed
Oh.
like immediately.
Okay.
I forgot
Has
who you
Evgeni
guessed.
guessed?
Yes.
Yeah.
He guessed Gavilar. and it's
so
done.
it's just me. Okay.
Mhm.
Then
Yeah,
I
it's
should
only
just come up.
yes.
I thought someone else was also
No.
waiting.
No.
No, okay.
I forgot what I guessed, so I can't help
too.
you out with that, but it was a good one.
What if you guessed
You guessed Helaron.
Yeah, that
I
was a
did.
good guess. That was a good guess.
one.
Sidious?
It is not
Toral
Sidious. It is not Toral Sidious. Whatever. That name is so hard to pronounce. Clue 5. This character is one of the main character's ancestors.
The Sunmaker.
Sadies.
It is the Sunmaker. David was slightly faster on the draw there.
I would also agree that Wendy was faster.
Yes. I will look at the recording, but I'm pretty sure that will be determined at a later date, and I will put text on who won. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
on-
Well,
on
it was
screen.
me, because it's easier to say Sunmaker than it is to say Sadies.
Now, I would like to point out that this person wrote the answer as Sadius the Sunmaker, which is not correct. And spelled
No.
Sadie's wrong. But yeah. This one was sent in by Alex. Oh, I didn't say who sent the other one in. The last one was sent in by Parker Eggleston.
Those were both really good. Those were
Yeah,
a
those,
good
I
pair.
thought those were really excellent Who's That Cosmere characters. It wasn't like Roshar, male. Like, it was like, oh, that was tricky. And got it at the end. Solid Who's That Cosmere characters. No complaints. Except for Sadie's being spelled
Excellent.
wrong. Whatever. But, it's hard to remember.
I mean, if you're going by spelling, I should have won. But
no, it was qualified correctly. But,
Let's all take a third of a point.
no. No.
We can split a point. I'm okay with that.
As long as Ian doesn't get one.
I mean, if you split a point, I still win. So
True. Oh,
Yeah. It's true.
Yeah, that's.
I
never cared
remember
about that.
reading Oathbringer and being incredibly excited that we got the name for the Sunmaker. Just so very excited.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, we hope you enjoyed this, getting to know Awakening a little better and analyzing it with more of a Cosmere flavor. So you can do more of that on 17shard.com for all your news, discussion, and fun that you could ever want. You could join our Discord. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, SoundCloud. Leave us a review on iTunes. You can support us on Patreon if you like. We hope you're all staying safe in these crazy times. But stay safe. Stay inside. Just listen to all the old Shardcast episodes. It's a great call. There's hundreds of hours for you to listen to.
It's true.
Over 100 episodes. Not even if
back
you
and-
go back to the old Shardcast.
Yeah. Go back and listen to Eric's read through of Elantris for the first 3 chapters.
No, don't do that. Don't do that. That's terrible. That was not good. We have much better microphone quality. And I also enjoy how all of these guys were like saying, with more things being online with meetings, like, I can hear the bad audio quality all the time. You're welcome, Shardcasters. Anyway, we will see you all next time.
Bye.
Peace.
Cheerio.
Ah.